watching people go out on their own, start new companies, that is also infectious to a certain degree. Yeah. And hearing about all the challenges was actually got to a point where it was exciting. And I was like, you know what? I actually want to have those same challenges too.
What's going on, Next Gen fam? Welcome back to Mentor Momentum with Next Gen HQ. I am so excited for this week's guest. We have an absolute wealth management guru with us today, following an impressive career in the finance industry, including stints at Morgan Stanley and Credit Suisse. He started his own firm back in 2015. As the founder and CEO of Proper Wealth Management, he has helped other founders and C-level executives in all areas related to their finance. We have so much incredible stuff to dive into. He's also already invited me to come live with him for a week, so we're best friends at this point. I'm so excited to welcome Jared Toren to the stage. Jared, thank you so much for joining us here on Mentor Momentum.
Absolutely. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me. Absolutely,
man. I want to dive in right away. I'm going to hit you with one right out the gate. That's a little bit of a fun, hard-hitting question, but in your mind, being around the founder space, what do you see as the most common mistakes that founders are making when it comes to trying to raise capital?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I think probably the most common thing is being undercapitalized that I see most often, but underestimating how difficult it is to actually raise capital. Yeah. I mean, for a second-time founder, right now I think we live in this environment of feast or famine that I keep hearing about. So meaning first-time founders are having a really, really hard time raising capital at times. And second-time founders are getting more money thrown at them than they actually need. Building a network well ahead of time so that you can be ready to go when you're actually need the capital is critically important, in my opinion. And so talk to as many people as you can, build a really good deck, make sure you get a lot of feedback. And one other thing that I hear a lot from venture capitalists is ask opinions, don't ask for money. So when you're coming to them and you're reaching out to them, ask them for their opinion on your business model, your deck. Yeah. And if they want to invest or they're really interested in more, they'll ask for more information or they'll take you down that path themselves.
Yeah, so insightful, man. I hit you with a hard one right out the gate. I wanted to.
That was a curve. Yeah, that was a wicked curve.
I love it, man. They all get easier from here. That's the goal. But Jared, I want to dive into obviously your story and kind of get us back into some of the stuff that you're doing today. But I want to start all the way back in the beginning. Kind of 20-year-old Jared coming out of school, world's in front of you, your future's ahead of you. What are you thinking about, and what's maybe like one piece of advice you would give to that version of yourself?
So my 20-year-old self or my 22-year-old self after I've left college?
Whichever one.
I think those are two very different Jareds.
I'm right there with you. Whichever one feels most opportune and in need of advice that you could share.
Yeah, I think that I would probably tell myself to take more risks. I think that, I grew up in a family where, and still, if you ask my father today, the most common question or the common response is always looking at the downside of things, right? And so that was a little bit built into my psyche at a really young age. And I think that even though I took some risks in my life, I was probably more methodical than I needed to be because failures or whatever you want to call them, I think it's just a function of perspective, but I think that I would have learned a lot more at a very young age had I just fallen on my face more frequently and took those risks and weren't afraid of what that failure meant to me at that time.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think, when I think about your career and the transition from a space that is so stable and, for myself, I was a finance major in college as well. So, I'm looking at the world as I'm leaving school and I'm like, all right, my options are kind of like investment banking, maybe like private wealth management, some of these spaces where I was like, I don't know if that's me, man. And, speaking to this next generation audience that is kind of going that alternative path, what was the moment that you knew you could transition from, kind of the corporate world of Morgan Stanley and Credit Suisse to being able to build your own business now?
I think it was an inevitable step for me. I didn't start out in wealth management. I started out in like corporate finance type roles. And eventually I think I spent most of my time in an independent world. So I was being a trader on my own dime. I was helping hedge funds raise capital. And so working within like going from like being on your own to working within a large company with what I would call like least common denominator rules, right? So like, what is the least common denominator rules we need to establish to manage a large population of advisors to make sure that they stay within this small box? And, when I was working at UBS, which was the last firm, I was just working with entrepreneurs for the most part. And edge cases don't work well within large organizations, and entrepreneurs in and of themselves are all edge cases. So I want to look at this investment, or I want to do these things. Give me an opinion on this. And at these large firms, it was really, really difficult to do that. They actually wouldn't allow you to. And I wouldn't say I got in trouble, but definitely the compliance officer had to come talk to me saying, you can't introduce this angel investment to this person, And there was a lot of situations like that came up, and watching people go out on their own, start new companies, that is also infectious to a certain degree. And hearing about all the challenges actually got to a point where it was exciting. And I was like, you know what, I actually want to have those same challenges too. And so I remember putting it in my head, in 3 years, I'm going to leave UBS and do my own thing. And then it was 1 year, and then it was 6 months, and it was like, in 3 months' time, I need to get out of here. Because once I think I made up my mind to take that jump, I just couldn't stand wasting like a lot of time. I needed to get to the point where I built and done enough research, and I felt like I had done that with UBS when I was there. And I think I left in April. And by, on January 1st, I was hitting the ground running, doing all my research, getting ready. And it took, 3 months, 4 full months. And I was out the door. I kept accelerating my departure date in my head.
Wow. I love that, man. But the crazy thing to me is you took your own advice that you would have given yourself. You took a crazy risk in going out on your own. How does that feel when you look at it now?
It wasn't that crazy of a risk. I was 31. No, I was 34 at the time. But, in my industry at the time, you can leave and take your clients with you, right? So I already had however you want to think about it, ARR, MRR, assets, revenue, ready to go, that all I needed to do was, do I have the faith that they'll follow me? And I was able to basically just, it's like replanting something from one part of your yard to another part. I was just able to kind of pick up and put it in over here. But there was certainly things that I needed to solve, and challenges, and how am I going to communicate, and problems that UBS really handled for me that then I had to figure out on my own. But again, there was a time in which those challenges were fun.
Yeah, absolutely, man. For our audience watching, what advice do you have for somebody that's, kind of in your similar shoes as you were at 34, thinking about, young entrepreneurs that are like, all right, how do I know when I'm ready to take this leap? How did you kind of calculate that risk and make it somewhat mitigated? Obviously you shared, a bit of that, but in your head, how were you able to say, okay, now's my time?
So I don't think you'll ever fully know. I think in anything in life, there's a leap of faith. And I always think of, and maybe I'm dating myself a little bit with this example, but I always think of entrepreneurship as like Indiana Jones. If you saw not the recent ones, but the whatever one it was, and he has to take this leap of faith, and and assume he'll be okay. And I just think that you ultimately just have to leap and know that regardless of really what happens, everything's going to be okay and it's going to work out. Again, my situation was a bit unique. I could calculate what I thought was worst case scenarios for what this would look like and how that would impact me. Again, my advice of doing it younger and going out there and just kind of getting after it, you just the longer time goes on, the more the less risk appetite you have. I had 2 kids, and the weekend I left UBS, I found out I had a third on the way.
Wow.
Which wasn't necessarily the best time to find out about that. But, it's just I had more to lose the longer time went on.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I really appreciate you sharing that. And I will say, you're not there yet on us not knowing Indiana Jones. I feel like a few more years past me, and then it might be an issue. But I at least got you with, Raiders of the Lost Ark over here. But
thank you. Yeah.
as you're thinking about your career journey and even in your personal life, one thing we love to talk about here is mistakes. And the lessons that you learn from them. And, in your life, is there one mistake or a moment of failure that stands out and something you learned from it that our people can avoid that same trap?
I don't think I have one in particular. I think I've made a lot of mistakes in life, or, I said before, I try not to look at things as mistakes. I'm not perfect, but I think they provide the best learning lessons that I've ever had. And so I think one of them was actually I had maybe a confirmation bias that turned out to not necessarily be true. So I've had a variety of partnerships in my life that did not work out. And I just thought to myself, and I got to the point where I said, partnerships are too hard. There's too much risk in them. Don't seek out the right partner. And even though I was able to build proper wealth management to the point where I feel like I was successful, I think that I would have gotten there quicker and had more fun had I had a partner on board. And so having bad partnerships built this narrative in my mind that I shouldn't seek and try to find the right person because it's easier to do it on my own. Yeah. And it's true to a certain degree. I think there's a quote, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with the team. And I think I didn't have that perspective early enough in that journey when I left UBS.
Absolutely, man. How has that manifested today? Have you been able to bring on some partners into the ecosystem that are currently fueling you forward?
I have. I ended up partnering or affiliating with another firm that I met through, like a trusted source. And 2+ years ago, I was trying to find the right partnership because I saw the writing on the wall. And I also got to the point where I only want to do certain things. And I realized, and it took me time, what do I really enjoy about my role in this industry? What do I want to do? What do I want to focus on? Do I want to build out this part of the team? And so I spent a few years talking seriously with a few firms that ultimately led to an affiliation, a merger, whatever you want to call it, with the firm October of last year, finally, after 2+ years of searching.
Wow. That's awesome to see, man. And so cool, to think about, as I think about our audience as well, everybody thinking about, all right, should I go solo? Should I get a co-founder? How do I want to progress here? And I think, it's really insightful to your point, even that you can go really far alone, but alone, you're not going to, you can't be a one-man show forever.
Yeah. And I think, again, in traditional entrepreneurship that I think of, there's a balance between having too many founders and having too few. And also very industry specific, right? If it's hardware and it's you need really technical people on board really early, or if it's software, making sure that you have a technical co-founder, maybe a CEO, right? And so there's a balance to strike between what industry you're operating in, and also not getting, and also understanding, okay, what is the expected exit multiples? Where what are companies being bought for in this space? Because I've seen where there's 5 founder teams, and they're in a space that it's I know eventually in 3 years, someone's going to leave because they're fully vested. The outcome's not worth it to them. They have another idea. They can go and get funding, and they walk, which is very expected in that scenario. So it's a I don't think there's a one size fits all approach to anything.
Absolutely. No, that makes a ton of sense. Jared, what are you doing, man, in your personal life that keeps you, this on top of your game? Do you have morning routine, life habits, anything you could share with us that are, keeping you performing at your best daily?
I have wish routines. So, I can tell you I can tell you a tall tale about how I wake up and I meditate and I do this. And then life tends to get in the way for me. I have kids, I am divorced, so I can have the intention one morning to get up early and meditate, but the kids wake up early and then it kind of goes out the window. And so, I'll call it when I'm at my best, I'm meditating in the morning and I'm doing some type of breathwork exercise. And I find between those two things in combination, when I do them together, I'm usually set up for a really good day regardless of what happens. It's hard to kind of push me off balance. I tend to be more centered.
Absolutely, man. What does that meditation practice look like for you? 10 minutes, kind of what are you trying to squeeze in your ideal day?
No, I mean, 10 minutes on waking up, like daily meditation, click the button, get through that. That tends to be a really good like start to the day, and then into a breath work session, which has been a new addition to the routine.
Gotcha. And fitness wise, man, are you doing anything there? I mean, you look like a fit guy. So unless the kids are just the secret and running around chasing kids keeps you in shape.
You can only see me shoulder up, so you can't see the rest. Yeah, I mean, I say I do my best to stay in shape. I've gone through some like back injuries as I've hit, 40. But yeah, gym is super important. I think keeping on top of your body and keeping fit, whether, aerobic or something that involves weights is like critically important, especially the older you get, the more important it is.
Absolutely. Yeah, I asked because, I'm thinking about as we talk to so many incredible people on this show, everybody seems to have some way that they're able to like get their mind right before they like dive into all the work. And I feel like the next generation, when you're not burnt out yet, you're kind of like, all right, man, I could just get into the work. I don't need any routines. I don't need any of this. But even for you now, man, like how are you continuing to keep that work-life balance or integration, whatever word, you want to use that, allows you to have that separation so you can still fulfill all of your life-related needs and obligations?
Yeah, I think I don't look at it like a balance. It kind of ends up being in like high tide and low tide, I think maybe you could draw a regression line in between it or an average, and it looks like it's very well balanced, but in reality, it's not. And like it's a blessing because I actually got divorced, and I look at it as a good thing because it forced me to like be very present with my kids. Like I couldn't offload that onto another partner. I had to take on that responsibility. I started doing all the pickups and drop-offs. And so like knowing, okay, these particular days like are like my work schedule is shrinking and the time with my kids is increasing. And eventually like I learned to absolutely love that time with them. And so I was kind of pushed into it where before I really struggled to find that balance because I had somebody that was picking up all that weight and had that role to do that. And so it was, again, only after going through something that was rather unpleasant that I came through the other side with just, this work-life balance. And I think I saw something on Twitter the other day, and I've heard it before, and I think it's really truth. It's, looking at your calendar and saying, what am I trading my time for today? Because again, like with kids, you get to see the passage of time in a very different way. You're watching it go by in a way that I never experienced before having kids.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. Thank you for sharing that. I love that analogy of high tides and low tides. And you're right, if you draw a regression in there, it looks probably pretty balanced, but being able to manage those different time zones and know, okay, this day is going to take more from me and this day I can give more to, the other people in my life. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not hitting my goal of being on the green. Like there's a green belt here in Austin, like getting onto the trail. Like ideally it would be once a week. I'm probably once every 2 weeks, and I moved to a place that, has some trails that I still haven't checked out, but I'm not even a week in. So I technically have a few more days. I think, just again, I think it comes down to figuring out what makes you happy and making sure you could squeeze that in as much as possible, because I'll go back to a time. I can't believe I'm 40 already. It just goes by so fast.
One thing I definitely want to talk to you about, Jared, I know on your bio and on your website, you talk about how your goal is to add more value than anybody else. And I think you seem to be a very value-driven guy. When you're thinking about your business and really adding this value to founders, what has kind of been your core differentiation, and how do you look at, really changing the game for, the founders whose wealth that you help manage and grow?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think it's just making sure that you understand what their expectations are, because once you understand someone's expectations, it's easy to at least meet them, if not exceed them. And so founders are, and maybe it's just a subset of people that I work with, and I don't want to make like a blanket statement about founders, but a lot of the people I work with see the world differently. And coming from a place where you're trying to build value in a company, and then you have to allocate your own money because now you have a substantial amount of it, that's a very different position to be in. And most of the people that I work with, again, not that this is every founder, they don't know what to do. And it's frankly very scary.
Yeah.
Going from knowing I know how to build value, I know how to drive revenue, which then, increases valuation, to then I have to invest in things I don't really understand. And I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I should be doing. And so like my goal is to come in there and make sure that they have a really clear path and give them that. I mean, I don't want to be overly cheesy, but that feeling of like clarity and confidence that they're like, okay, like I'm no longer stressed about this. He's got it. And anytime someone says, yes, we're going to work with you, Jared, there to me is like going back to that Indiana Jones, like that's a leap of faith. Like trust is built in time. It's not built when someone says they're gonna work with me. That takes some people. It takes 3 months. Sometimes that takes a year. I never really polled people to ask that question, but I do know like it takes time. It takes time. Like I say I'm going to do X and Y. Am I delivering upon that? And thankfully I've been good at bridging those gaps.
Absolutely. How do you think about, because even for next gen and some of the stuff that I work on, we're always thinking about like, all right, how do we deal with customer experience, partner happiness? How do you think about that realm? Somebody signs on, they're like, all right, Jared, I trust you, man. What do you give people your personal cell? Are you like the guy that's like, all right, I'm here 24/7 for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've taken the path, which is maybe a little bit different in wealth management, of I don't want a tremendous amount of clients. Right. And so like going back to how do you strike that life balance? Like I don't have 1,000 clients. I have less than 30. And I really do value my time. And so, yeah, everybody has my cell. I'm getting texts right now that you probably can't see. I got a phone call was from someone before. And, outside of like, if they really need me, I'm always on for them. But just making sure I'm like hitting expectations. It's like really like a phone call. Like I don't send out surveys. I ask them like, hey, like, what am I doing that I'm not doing that I need to do? What can I improve? What are you really happy with? And I felt like I've done really great at. Where do you think I'm missing the mark? And what do I need to improve on for you? Because a lot of times, like some of those things and areas I need to improve on, they're not just for that one client. It's things that will apply to everyone else I work with. And that's the most valuable information. I kind of know already what I do well. Sometimes what it's hard to know sometimes like where your blinders are, where your blind spots are. And that's where it becomes really valuable to get like in the weeds with the client. Be like, what am I not doing well? You need to give me something, one thing that's bad feedback so I can work on it.
Absolutely. Dude, that was a goal of mine, man. I'm sitting here being like, wow, as we think about our business, should we think about, okay, do we go with less clients to be able to really put all the effort in on the ones that you do have and ensure? And also I know Nick behind the scenes, man, part of our customer experience team is ferociously taking notes on like, all right, man, I got to make sure that we have honest feedback conversations, et cetera. But that was incredible.
It's hard when you're trying to manage a larger population of people, right? Or larger client base. It becomes like, what is like an efficient way to get this done? Which sometimes means, right, emails and things like that fall through the cracks. And it's harder to outreach maybe thousands and thousands of people at a high response rate. Again, like the number of people that I'm having to, get feedback from is, significantly smaller.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. One question I love to ask at the end of all of our interviews, I think everyone watching looks up to you and says, all right, Jared's got the level of success that I want to go for, man. And that's somebody I aspire to, somebody I want to be. I'm saying it for me too, not just for the audience, but how do you define success for yourself and how are you striving towards that every single day?
Yeah, I think that it's really easy for me to look at like, how much money am I making, or what are, it's still something that I struggle with, frankly. Like what is success? I work with people who I look at financially are incredibly successful, and I do very, very well. I'm very, very happy what I've been able to build and where I'm at. But I could tell you there's a big gap between like their net worth and what they've been able to do financially and me. And so, just using that as a metric has been frankly tough. And I try not even to look at that at all, because that has never made me happy or fulfilled. And so it's, I don't really have a a simple answer or a good answer. It's just like, do I feel good at the end of the day?
Yeah.
It's kind of like the most simplest measure that I have lately. And am I over focused on my own finances and net worth and wealth? Am I making comparisons? Am I getting outside? If I get to see my kids, hug them, if I'm not overreacting to things that are going on in their lives, because it's, as a parent, that's, always tough. And just laying down at night and looking back at the day and thinking like that felt good. That's kind of my simple measure of success.
I love that, man. I absolutely love that. And for me too, I'm like, that's what makes sense. I think it's so easy to be like, all right, I didn't reach the dollar signs or the, goals that I set for the quarter, but it ends up, usually just being because you compare and you contrast and you say, you can beat yourself up instead of thinking about the higher level stuff.
It's really, comparing is probably the easiest thing to do. And I do it so much like subconsciously. And again, like, and I had a conversation with someone yesterday over lunch who works with people like very similar profile to people I work with. And it's hard sometimes. And you fall into this trap of like, I need to have more of this or more of that, or my revenue needs to grow by X amount. And again, like I'm in an industry where it's a services industry, right? I'm a consultant, for lack of a better term. And, usually consultant revenue, if you're a single person that's like the biz dev guy, if your revenue doesn't grow at 50% a year, maybe in the beginning, but like you can't maintain that level of growth, or you're going to or my work-life balance is going to completely go out the window. I'm going to be crazy.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. Well, I know we somehow made it to close to the end of our time, but before we end, I want to give you the stage, man. Obviously, you're talking to an audience of next generation founders and startups, entrepreneurs, leaders. Anything that you want to share? Any tips of advice, words of wisdom that you have for this audience that you're speaking to right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll go back to what you told me, or the question that you asked me in the beginning of what would I tell my younger self. It would just be to take more risks. Do the right thing. Always have good intentions in mind. There's more than enough money out there. And if not, just buy Bitcoin, it seems like, and that just keeps going up and then you'll get there. But just like, don't be afraid. Don't always look at the downsides. Take the risk and do the right thing.
Jared, man, thank you so much. Yeah. Back to you. Go for it. Back to you.
No, that's it. Yeah,
that's it, man. Thank you so much for joining us here on Mentor Momentum. This was an absolute treat. Everything you shared, man, from the advice to, the ways that you're keeping your work-life balance and the importance of success, even that one's super resonating with me, thinking about the day at the end of the day, man. Thank you so much for dropping all this incredible knowledge here for the next gen community.
Thank you. I hope it's helpful. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. That was Mentor Momentum, sharing life and business lessons from incredible leaders. Looking for more momentum? Subscribe to our weekly Momentum newsletter at nextgenhq.com and check out our other podcast, Momentum Audio, on any of your favorite podcast channels. Now that's momentum.